whole concept of this was just to see what happens. You might be asking, why did you do this? What was the purpose? Well, the purpose was a really cool YouTube video, but also just to see what happens. And this is really good evidence and really good data to have. We now know what happens. We know that if we use Type Bond 1, it's going to come apart. We know the cool patina that we were looking for on the swamp ash is totally there. It just looks amazing, and we're not going to touch it. I'm not going to sand it. I'm not going to clean it. We're going to leave it as is as much as possible. And I'm not going to be invasive with this process, so I don't plan on rejointing these edges. I want this to be as authentic and genuine as we can get it. So this is a guitar body that was in the garden for 1 year, and we want it to look like it was in the garden for 1 year. Put this in on May 4th of 2022. It's easy to remember, May the 4th be with you. And I took this out about a week or two early, so I wanted to get a little bit of the moisture out of the wood before I had to glue it back together. So it did actually come apart, and it was glued together with the Type Bond 1, the white glue, which is water soluble and not meant for exterior use. So immediately after about, 3-4 months, you could start to see the guitar body splitting at these glue seams. And then eventually it just completely came apart, and there's no evidence at all of any glue residue. So the weather, the rain, the ice storms, and the Texas heat just completely obliterated any evidence of glue. There's no residue whatsoever. This body came out exactly the way I anticipated it would. If you watched the first video, then you know that I had these little wooden planter boxes, and they had the perfect patina I was looking for on tele body. And I thought, well, let's try it. Let's throw a body out there and let's see if we can get that tarnishing and patina. And we did. It's identical to what I expected and what I imagined. Now, because this was in the garden for 1 year, the back obviously is going to look a little bit different than the front. But let's focus on the front first. Now, what I like about it and what really intrigues me is the grayness of it. Right? It's not brown or black, it's gray. Now, where does that come from? I don't know. I once had a friend from work who went skydiving on his birthday, and he said that he tasted the clouds. I thought, cool. And I asked him, well, what did the clouds taste like? And he said, like dirt. So I assume that in a raindrop, there's more than just hydrogen and oxygen. There's probably a whole bunch of other payload and content in it that is going to be applied to anything that it touches. In particular, something as spongy as wood that likes to soak everything up. Now, clearly there was also dirt on this, but the dirt was on the bottom. And you can see it's actually not that dirty on the bottom. It's fairly pale still. Now, the grain does actually have some dirt in it, but it's not as pronounced as the sides or as the top. And the top is really the star of the show. There were bugs living in it, all sorts of bugs. We had those little pill bugs. We call them roly-polies here in Texas. There were ants, and they're still tiny little ants that I'm kind of squish every time I see them. There were termites, and there were snails, which I thought was cool. So this was a home. It was an entire ecosystem for the flora and fauna in the garden. And I thought that was really pretty too. And it just made me kind of smile because as guitar builders, you know, we tend to have like extra bits and bobs like this, and kind of cool to have it in the garden, you know? Kind of like a cool musical coral reef of sorts. So the back, let's take a look at the back. I actually drilled a hole for the control cavity because when it was raining, the first rain we had when I put this in the garden, it was pooling up in the control panel. And I thought something bad was gonna happen. So I did drill a hole and I thought, who cares, just a hole. I mean, this is a relic body. And you can see we can get that water to drain out. And it did, but then of course, after time, it's just swelled up and nothing ever escaped. So I just kind of gave up on that. I'm only interested right now in gluing this back together. So there's no other structural damage with the exception of maybe just a little bit of warping along these pieces. And that's okay. Like I said, we're going to rejoint these just with the sanding beam and glue them. And whatever type of variation we have with the waviness, we're going to keep, and we're going to consider that a feature, not a defect. The other thing that people might be thinking was, why the heck did you take a perfectly cool, awesome tele body and destroy it in the garden? And the answer is I didn't. The answer is this is going to be a functional guitar. So there's a texture to this wood now. So at a very magnified level, this is what is going on the guitar. And it looks absolutely fantastic and feels great too. And that's occurring quite a bit in the the darker grain of the swamp ash. It turned out pretty well considering there was so much water in this. Here are the string through ferrules. I haven't tested them yet. We'll see if we can get some ferrules to fit in here. I'm hoping they are too loose rather than too tight. If they are too loose, we can always glue them in, so not an issue. The end grain is very dark, so end grain just soaks up everything you throw at it. And there's just a lot of charcoal coloration here. So this is really interesting to see how much the wood grew and outgrew those frets on either side of the fretboard. That's the opposite of fret sprout. And it occurs on every single fret. 2 to 2.5 mil on each side. These are the string through ferrules, and I've relic them. What I do is just dunk them in the brass black, and then I hit them with 3000 grit sandpaper, and they turn from that black to this kind of gunmetal gray, which I think is going to complement the body really well. So the 1 year in a garden tele is complete, but it's just a fascinating guitar. And really the whole idea behind this was kind of an exploration about like, what is a guitar? What can a guitar be? And really a guitar could be anything. It could be a 2x4, and it can be, you know, a Chinese guitar made overseas. It could be anything. It's just a guitar. It's just strings on a piece of wood, and really it comes down to how you play it and what you're doing with your hands, and nothing else really matters. And I think this is kind of a good illustration of that you don't need some fancy guitar. This is just a hunk of wood just sitting out in the dirt for a year. And it sounds really good. I mean, it sounds like a tele. So I did actually sort of like relic the hardware. So the knobs are reliced, and the control plate and the bridge. What I did with the bridge was kind of cut it in half. So this is a traditional tele bridge, but I cut off the section that has, you know, the pickup to make it sort of like a hardtail Strat. And I think the look is really cool because I've always loved the look of the bridge pickup on a tele where it's just kind of like floating like that. It just looks so cool. And I reliced the hardware for the neck pickup. And I think I just had these pickups laying around in my stash. So this is just a really cool sounding single coil. I mean, it sounds great. And the bridge is pretty cool too. But I'm keeping it in the middle position just for the hum canceling because, you know, it's pretty clean that way. But I really do love that single coil. So kind of like bell-like tones off the single coil. And again, these are just cheap Alnico pickups. Probably some of the cheapest Alnico pickups on the market. I think I got them on eBay. So really not a lot of money invested in this. The neck is also something I purchased to just put on here. So this is just one of those, you know, licensed Fender style necks, and it's got a nice rosewood board on there. I did a leveling, a crowning, a polish, and I did relic the tuners as well, just to kind of maintain that look. The jack plate is also reliced, and the neck plate is also reliced, just to kind of keep that look. Strap buttons are reliced too. And this is strung up with 11 to 56s, I believe. Just the Dario, and it's tuned to drop C right now. So the tuners were the tuners I took off the Stu Mac kit. So if you remember in my last vid with the Relic Stu Mac kit, I actually bought like the vintage style tuners. So these are the actual tuners that came from the kit, and I just, again, kind of relic them up just to match everything here. This neck did come with a plastic nut, and who cares? And it was a little high, and which is one of the reasons why I chose to use like a thicker gauge string. So I don't usually use 11s. And so it just worked out. So I got my nut files, and I filed these for 11 to 56s. So this is a really thick string, at least to me it's a thick string. But it sounds really good, and it's got that kind of twang. The bridge pickup does have that brass plate at the bottom. Super cool guitar and a lot of fun, and it's just like pretty to look at, and it's pretty to kind of hold, and it's just something different. And I know a lot of people are not into relics, but this wasn't really a relic. This is a Mother Nature relic, right? I didn't touch this at all with my hands. I just left it out in the garden. Some people might think that's the craziest idea in the world, but it is different and it is unique, and I really dig it. So I think this experiment is going to be a success. I think it worked out really cool. I think if, you know, you want to try something like this, you can learn from my mistakes. In any case, super cool guitar. Thanks for watching. Take it easy.